Okay. Welcome everybody to the Miami Beach JCC BYOL, Bring Your Own Lunch and Learn series that we have been having all throughout the summer. And we are excited to extend that program through the month of August. So we have a lot, a few more really exciting programs to come. And I want to thank Dr. Miriam Klein-Kasanoff for her partnership and her friendship and her professionalism in creating this program with me. It's been quite a joy to work with her and to bring these exciting events to you. So thank you so much. Please do put yourselves on mute. I'm hearing some noise, so I appreciate that. Thank you. Today we have an author with us who has written her first memoir, Lisa Goldberg. We actually had hoped to have her back in March, and lo and behold, when everything went down, we of course had to postpone that program, and we're really excited to be able to bring her today. So I'm going to say a few words about Lisa and give you a little information about her background, and then I'm going to hand it over to Miriam, who will take it from there. And with that, that's where we are. So again, I'm hearing some noise, so please do put yourselves on mute. I'm leaving it to you to do that because I don't want to fool with any of the settings. Oh, and just another little housekeeping thing, we are going to be using the chat. You have been with us before, so you're used to that. Please find the chat button on the bottom of your screen, and as we go along, any questions that you have for Lisa, you can put there, and we will get to those questions towards the end of the program. And any other questions, or we will be also putting some information in there as we go. Okay. And I'm going to admit one more person. Lisa Novick Goldberg was born in Brooklyn, my hometown, and grew up in the Five Towns on Long Island. She raised her daughter Maggie in Ardsley, New York, and she received her bachelor's degree from Vassar College and her master's degree in international affairs from Columbia School of International and Public Affairs. She now lives in Coconut Grove, Florida, with her husband, Stan Blake. And The Apple and the Shady Tree, which we will be hearing about today, is her first book. So she's an inspiration to all of our would-be authors on the call here today with us. And we are excited to hear her story. So with that, I will hand it over to Miriam, who will get the program started. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you for your kind words. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you in these wonderful Wednesday Bring Your Own Lunch series. It's really quite a success, isn't it? We have over 100 participants almost every week, and we're just growing and growing with our audience. And so we hope to continue this through the month of August with a grand finale program that we're going to tell you about later on in the month. Lisa, welcome, and welcome to everyone in the audience today. I am so pleased to have this opportunity to introduce you today. You know, I was researching some reviews about your wonderful memoir, and Kirkus says, let me read to you. The memoir, The Apple and the Shady Tree, is an honest, funny, and thorough reflection on a complicated family. Goldberg's book begins in 1987. One night, she was in her New York City apartment watching the local news, and the lead story was about the murder of Irwin Schiff, who was shot in the head while dining at an Italian restaurant in Manhattan. Schiff had ties to the mob, but the author knew him for another reason. Irwin Schiff was one of her father's best friends. Soon the FBI was at her door. Lisa Novick Goldberg recounts in this book what happened after that about her New York upbringing and investigates her father's mob ties. This memoir is an honest, funny, and thorough reflection on a complicated family, says the review. So why don't you take it from there? Tell us what happened, how that happened, and then I personally hope that you will also let us know how you came to the title of this book. And then when you're through, I would like to give the audience an update of all the exciting things that are happening to you about this book, including a possible movie on Netflix, right? So I turn it over to you, Lisa, to tell us this incredible story.
First, I want to thank you all for having me. I don't have that much time, so I'm going to make it brief. I'm blown away by this lunch crowd. This is in the middle of the day. This is amazing, and I thank you. Since it's not a book club and you were not asked to read my book, I'm going to read you a 2-page introduction to my book, which is going to give you the whole overview of what my book is about, and then we'll go from there. We'll break it down. They say that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I like to think that this Macintosh took a long roll into another orchard, but I'm not sure. I'll let you judge. This is a book about my family, the Noviks, who were best described as unusual. It is about my complicated relationship with my father, whose closest friends just happen to be the bosses of the Genovese crime family. It is about my search to find myself after having spent a lifetime straddling 2 very distinct worlds. One as an upper middle class suburban girl who attended elite schools, ran in privileged circles, and identified strongly with her Judaism. And the other as a sort of mafia princess whose upbringing gave access to another kind of elitism and privilege and landed me in front of a grand jury. The story is told from my perspective. You are introduced to my father, Herbert Novik, born into a poor Jewish family in 1928 in the rough and tough Brownsville neighborhood of Brooklyn, made infamous as the home of Murder, Inc. A job as a teenager on the Brooklyn dockyards changed his fate when he met the men who became his lifelong friends. The men who then went on to become the capos of the powerful Genovese family. It was then that Herbie Novik morphed into John or Johnny or Big John Novik. You will meet his bride, my stunning but deeply troubled mother, who was a formidable match in their explosive 53-year marriage. Their genetic shortcomings and poor choices created a chaotic home for my sister and me, characterized by anger and fear, disappointment and confusion. I have been far luckier than my sister, who could never overcome the abuse of being used as a pawn between our parents' battles. Through chronological vignettes, both very funny and profoundly sad, I take you on my journey from early childhood in Brooklyn to the wealthy Jewish ghetto known as the 5 Towns of Long Island, where I grew up, to my adulthood, with its twists and turns, challenges, and triumphs. Beginning with a murder, I introduce you to the real-life Goodfellas who came in and out of my life courtesy of my father's role as the moneymaker for the Genovese family. We will visit the mafia-infused worlds of the casinos of glitzy 1960s and 70s, and 1980s Las Vegas and Atlantic City, the boxing industry, Manhattan's iconic garment center, the pre-MTV record industry, the restaurants where mob business deals were made and celebrated, and a corrupt boutique bank that was tied to a mob murder. So join me, it's quite a ride. I've had a very interesting life. I'm 62 years old. I'm a New Yorker. I only moved down here 9 years ago. The book was not planned out in terms of what the themes would be, other than a mafia. It was going to be a mafia book. But it took 4 years to write, and it kind of morphed into 4 different themes. Of course, the obvious theme and the Galizzi theme is the mafia. My father was the moneymaker for the Genovese family. I grew up knowing that we were very different than our neighbors in the 5 towns, whose parents were doctors and lawyers, who belonged to country clubs and spent Sunday playing golf and having family day, and none of the above. I grew up in a community that was 99.9% Jewish. I grew up with all Italians. They did not live in our neighborhood. They lived in the village in Manhattan, but those were the people that we associated with. I grew up with Sally boxcars and Benny Eggs Mangano and Johnny Sausage Barbato. These were the people that I knew. But because I lived in the 5 towns and later on went to Ivy League schools and was a good student, I had 2 different worlds, and I fit neatly into both of the worlds growing up, which sounds fabulous, but it's rather confusing for me. So you have the mafia element. I did not know the extent of my father's involvement in the mafia until the 1980s, when I was working for a Jewish nonprofit organization, and I got a knock at the door at my office one freezing pre-Christmas evening, and it was the FBI. And let me tell you, when you see it on TV, it's TV. When 2 agents are standing in front of you with badges, and they are not looking for small talk, and you don't know what they're there for, it is a traumatic experience. I was 30 years old. I was only married a year and a half, and I had everything in front of me. We had just moved into a new home up in Westchester in New York, and I received a subpoena to appear before a grand jury. I'm not going to tell you everything. I'm hoping that I'll give you enough that you'll want to read the book, but it was a turning point in my life. I was told I would be in front of a grand jury that was investigating the mafia. At that time, Rudy Giuliani was the mayor of New York, and I must say he did a tremendous job in cleaning up the 5 families who had a massive, the metropolitan area at the time. That's all I was told. I suspected, I knew I didn't do anything, so what could I have been there for? It was to answer questions about my father and to answer questions about my father's friends. I was told by the prosecutor, because she saw what a state I was in, that I would be there for, she didn't know how long, but my attorney, a criminal attorney, me, Lisa Novick, who wouldn't spit on the sidewalk, had a criminal attorney, and he said, don't worry, you'll be in there 15, 20 minutes. You didn't do anything, don't worry about it. Tell the truth, and you'll be out of there. 15 minutes turned into 2.5 hours. And when I emerged from the grand jury, I went into a depression and an anxiety. I went into basically a catatonic state. I did not get out of bed for a week. I was terrified. Again, you see people on TV all the time. They go in front of grand juries. People are witnesses all the time. But it's very rare that you're called to be a witness against your father. Am I going to put him in jail? Is something I'm going to say put him in jail? Will something I say incriminate me? I lost all track of reality. Nothing, my mind was telling me how silly all this was, but my body had taken over, and I lost it. And to this day, I still suffer post-traumatic stress, not just from the grand jury. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. It was from a lifetime of anxiety and depression, which is the next theme in the book, mental health. I come from a family of generational mental health issues. We see on my father's side, which you'll learn about, there was depression, there was drug use, addiction issues. In fact, I'm going to read you an excerpt from my book that tells you a little bit about my father's side of the family to know this. Keep in mind, this is a serious book. This is a sad book, but my parents were characters, and there's a lot of very funny parts, and I'm hoping that you're going to like this. Before my parents said I do, Janet, my mother, had a pretty good idea about the craziness she was marrying into. Her first meal with her soon-to-be in-laws, Francis and Irving Novick, was a Saturday lunch at their apartment. According to my mother, it was like a circus. Everyone was talking loudly and no one was listening. Your grandmother kept wiping everything with a filthy dish rag while she yelled, Hoibit, come to the table, come eat. Your grandfather was propped up on a chair with a bib around his neck to catch the stray food that your grandmother kept shoveling into his mouth. He had Parkinson's disease. He kept mumbling something which I was sure was a warning for me to get out while I could. For dessert, she served Aunt Ida's famous dairy cake, which was wrapped in about 10 layers of wax paper to contain the grease. Those romantic courtship stories continued with Cousin Jakey's engagement party, which was the first time that Janet met the extended Novick clan. The party, held at a Chinese restaurant in Syosset, Long Island, featured a simple set menu for the guests. When my mother described the afternoon to me, she had a look on her face as if she were drinking a colonoscopy prep. Lisa, Daddy was always a pain in the ass, such a troublemaker. He was never one to go along with the rules. He wasn't happy with the limited choices that were offered, so he called the waiter over to do his own ordering. That's when chaos erupted. That sounds good, says Aunt Selma. I'll have winter melon soup too, just like him, she pointed to my father. I'll have bird's nest soup, chimed in Uncle Jules. Hey, Johnny ordered spare, said Soretta. I love spare ribs. Give me an order of spare ribs too. Disgusted waiter eventually made an announcement. You have a choice of wine or egg drop soup, no winter melon soup. You have a choice of egg roll or shrimp roll, no spare ribs. You have a choice of chow mein or egg foo young or shrimp lo mein. No shrimp with lobster sauce, no special fried rice, no steak. I'd never seen any like it, my mother recounted. They acted like they'd never eaten before. I thought that Jakey was going to have a stroke. You could see him adding up the bill in his head. My mother says she is willing to bet that many, many years ago, in some shtetl in Minsk, my father's plaque over the door of the village insane asylum that read, "Welcome Notes." So I hope you get the humor. I hope you like the humor. As complicated as the story is, there are many very funny parts. So mental health. My father, as I said, had a history on his side, which he was not keen on admitting to. My mother, who is 87, who lives in the Palace, Kendall, right now, she was never formally diagnosed, but she has all the symptoms of borderline personality disorder, which if you know anything about that, it is not a good diagnosis. Because part of the reason is they do not accept any responsibility for their actions. They are victims of everything. And it makes it very difficult for a child, particularly a female child, to grow up with a mother like this. So people will say to me, Lisa, you're functional. Highly functional, how did you overcome a family like this? It's a very common question that I'm asked. And very early on, the survival mechanism in me to mentors, whether they were teachers in elementary school or counselors in sleepaway camp. I went to people who I wanted to, quietness and the predictability of the types of families that I wanted to become. Dose of divine intervention saved me, as my therapist says, from either being an addict or a criminal or just
Lisa, I'm just going to jump in here because we are having trouble hearing you. You have been frozen for most of the presentation, but we've been able to hear you mostly. But now your internet connection is quite poor. I don't know if there's something that you can do to fix that. So I apologize, everybody. Give us one moment while we address this with Lisa. Lisa, are you with us? Do we hear her?
I don't know what happened. I'm sorry.
Oh, that does seem to be, yeah, your internet connection is a little bit poor. When we rehearsed yesterday, you were in a different room. I don't know if that makes a difference,
Yes,
but
I was on
we do want,
okay. I'm going to see what I can do real
yes,
quickly about getting some things paused here.
yes.
Just one moment. Pause. Fix that. Device. Apply changes. I'm going to pause. I apologize. Close. Let's see what else we can pause. Connected to date.
Thank you for your patience, everybody.
Pause this.
I think there's been a lot of weather out there
Just getting
today.
all fired up and everything. Once. I think this is going to make a difference. I apologize, everybody. So we have mental health, and my mother
we're all
personality disorder person. My sister, I mentioned. Can you hear me now? Your connection cable is unstable.
Yes. I don't know if there's another Wi-Fi network or if somebody else in your home is using the Wi-Fi, maybe they can stop using it. I know yesterday when we rehearsed this, you were in a different room. I don't know if that made a difference, but we are waiting with bated breath for you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
You can, okay. The next theme in the book we have now with the mafia, we have mental health. The next is my discovery of my Judaism. Is a little girl growing up in the 5 towns, and originally in the Crown Heights section of Brooklyn, I used to pass the Lubavitches, and my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, who I was very close to, I used to say, who are these people? And look at them, they're happy. What? She says, they're Jewish people. I said, but I'm Jewish. Why aren't we the same? So as I got older and could explore my Judaism on my own, because I always felt that I was missing out on something, I became involved in my Judaism. Eventually I became a Chabadnik. They really welcomed me in and taught me about the religious, not the traditional aspects of things. So that was another theme that emerged from the book. And the other theme that has come from the book is the power of the human spirit, which again, I didn't plan these things out. These are themes that came, particularly this last one, that came from journalists, from reviews that I'm getting on the book. I always said that your past explains you why you are, but it doesn't define you. I had this crazy past, and something inside of me, some strength, resilience, whatever, that my sister unfortunately did not have, allowed me to rise above all of this, maybe to write the story and to share about mental health and to make it a more open topic, and to show that with the right resources. I went into psychoanalysis 5 years ago, which helped me tremendously to look at my past and how to get to deal with the issues that were holding me back. That you can rise above a lot of your problems. We all have problems. We all have an apple in the shady tree to write about. Some are not as glamorous as mine, but we all have our own stories. And these are some of the topics that have been emerging from the book. My first response was, the book was published in December. And I said to my husband, who many of you may know, ironically, I married Stanford Blake, who was a circuit court judge in Miami, a celebrated circuit court judge for 22 years, 16 of which were spent on the criminal court bench. I said to him, my mazel, I write a book, I do something notable in my life, and it's during COVID. But this has turned out to be a very good thing for me in terms of my literary success, because the book has taken off in a world of TV watching, and I am being considered now for a TV series, whether it's with Netflix or MGM. We're exploring these things right now. So these are some of the questions that I have been asked all the time. One is, were you afraid to write the book? Did you have any fears? The ostensible fear would be, are you going to get whacked for writing? I did not share any mafia secrets in the book. I didn't know them. My father was hardly ever home. And when he was home, we did not sit around a restaurant on Sunday night in the Chinese restaurant. He said, you know, we whacked Salvatore this weekend, Lisa. And how was school this weekend? He didn't share any of these things with us, mercifully so. The other thing is, they're either in diapers right now, or they're in jail and on their way out. So they are not foes of mine. The other thing was, I used the internet. The process was, I would come up with a name. My father's best friend was Benny Eggs Mangano. Benny was the capo, the chief of the Genovese family. And I'd say, let's see what I could find. I researched all the characters that I had come in contact with in my life. And there's plenty out there on them. It was a fascinating process for me. When it came to researching my father, oddly enough, he was never arrested. He was never indicted. There's nothing on him, except my husband suggested to me, you have access to the FBI files for the under the Freedom of Information Act. So my first step in writing the book was to contact the FBI. And let me tell you, you need a strong stomach for this, because I got back a letter almost immediately. The person that you are referencing has 72,000 entries against his name, and it's going to take some time. We'll try and short track you, so it's going to take some time. I did eventually receive some information which was heavily redacted, but much of it can be filled in because I took the instances in my childhood and was easily able to apply what the FBI was referring to, even with the redaction. So the second thing about the book is, people say, oh, Stan, I'm unstable here. Can you hear me, guys? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes. We can hear you. All of a sudden you are frozen though, but we were able to hear you. So I don't know what changed. Lisa? We were able to hear you. Now we don't hear you for a moment.
I'm so
Yes,
sorry.
there you go.
You're doing work outside. I apologize. Can you hear me? Can you
Yes,
hear
we
me?
can hear you. Yes, we can.
Okay. So let's see where I was. I apologize. Was it cathartic? The book has been a mixed message. My psychologist encouraged me to write the book because I had terrible anxiety, panic attacks all of the time. And that's being able to get out all the stuff that I saw and experienced in my childhood. What eventually happened, it has been cathartic. I'm not afraid anymore. I'm letting everything out. On the other hand, it has released a torrent of fears, trigger points. When I talk about the grand jury, I get very nervous still. It brings me back. There's a series on Netflix now called, the mob is very big now on Netflix and Amazon, Fear City, which is going through, each episode is a different mob boss. I have not yet gotten to the Genovese family because on some level, it's not valid, but I don't want to see the people that I grew up with and that I knew so intimately on TV, and I don't want to know the full story in many ways. I really don't want to know. Like, I recently learned that the Genovese family had been involved in the 60s in the heroin, in the Harlem heroin distribution. And that is very, very painful to me, to know that my father had any connection to these things. So why did I write the book then? You're going to think it's because to catharsis, I had to get it out. I had a bone to pick. I had want to get back at my mother, I did my father. None of the above. The real reason is I was 58 when I started the book. I went to the best schools. I had the best friends. I had the best entree to corporations and organizations. I did nothing with it because I could not function in a corporate setting or in a structured setting because of my depression and my anxiety. I said, you know what, Lisa? You have friends that are judges there. They welcome you in. I can hold my own, but what have you done for yourself? I've taken care of people my whole life. I've taken care of my mother with borderline and try to make her life better. My daughter has had several issues. My father, this is awful. And I said, this is my time. If I don't get moving and make my mark, I said, I can write. And I have a writer's dream story to tell. I have the mafia, I have mental illness, I have Judaism, I have all kinds of things. I'm going to write a book. We'll see what happens. The reviews have been excellent, and I feel like if nothing else happens from here on, I've done something. I've made my mark. So now I'm going to throw out the questions. I'm sure you've got questions, and I love questions. What's nice about this is there are things, if you read the book later on, that I don't answer in the book. I save that for these types of interactions. So please ask me anything. I'm open. Hi, Stu.
Thank you so much for sharing. I know that Miriam, did you want to come back in? And I think you
Actually,
had some things to get started.
Yeah, I was muted. So I want to thank you, Lisa. This is hand clapping on Zoom. That really
Is that really?
You know, it takes a lot.
Thank you all.
Like this.
Oh, I like that.
It takes a lot of guts for somebody to spill all the things that you have been sharing. Like you said, all the stuff that you had to pull together and then to write about it and then to come out and tell, like today, over 100 people. These are very difficult personal matters that most of us keep inside. We're afraid to talk about them. So I really want to congratulate you for the nerve, the chutzpah, to be able to do that. And I just want to tell the audience that besides the possibility of the Netflix, that there's been an article written on the book, on your life, on people.com. That would be People Magazine, correct? And you
Yes,
appeared
correct.
on the television show, The Daily Mail, and you have received many favorable reviews. And there's talk about the Netflix series. So as we say in the Jewish culture, Mazel Tov, Kol HaKavod. And now I'm going to turn it over to my dear colleague, Karen, to ask you questions. There may be a little bit of a break between hearing the question and answer because you are having internet difficulties. And by the way, David Schachter just said, thank you very much. You're an exceptional lady. And he's a mutual survivor friend of both of us. So Karen, I'm going to turn it over to you. You're muted. You might want to unmute yourself.
Yes, I was waiting for the right moment to come back on. So thank you. And yeah, we have some questions coming in. One is from Gloria. She wants to know about particularly your father's connection in Las Vegas. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
While you were all going to Williamsburg and visiting Nana down in Miami and whatever for your childhood vacations, I was going to Las Vegas. My father was a major gambler. My mother dabbled too. She liked to play the slots, but my father was a big time gambler, which I later learned was mob money. He could put down 50,000 on a crap table. So we went on junkets. Las Vegas years ago, before it became Disneyland, used to be the playground for the mob. And that's in the 60s and 50s, 60s, 70s, but I only remember the 60s and 70s. We were VIP to the VIPs. The same thing with Atlantic City in the 80s. My father was a big deal there. So that's where I spent all of my vacations. But all I really wanted was to go to a Nana, anybody's Nana, in Miami Beach and spend those types of vacations. So somebody asked me about a sense of humor, just to say, the sense of humor has saved me. My mother has a fabulous sense of humor, borderline or no borderline. She is very sarcastic. She has a terrific wit. I am not a victim. I don't want to come off as poor Lisa. I don't see myself that way. We were a family. They never got divorced. We were a codependent mush. They're hanging on to one another in January 2010. And I spent 1 year by his side, the best year I ever spent with him, that I felt free because I could make my own decisions, no more blaming on daddy and daddy blaming on me and my mother pulling me in with my father. For the first time in my life, when he died at 50, I was 52 years old, I became an adult. Next question.
Did your father ever talk about his experiences with you, which was Stephanie is asking that, and I'll add to it, could you tell us a little bit more about your relationship? Was he a fun dad? Was he, around a lot as a family man? Or, I mean, you said that he was not around a lot, but when he was, kind of what was his personality? And, did he ever talk to you about?
If you read the book, you will see all I ever wanted from him was more of him. I adored him. He was smart, even though he wasn't formally educated. He could do numbers like that, henceforth he was the moneymaker for the Genovese family. He had a positiveness about him that anything was, mother on the other side was very gloomy. All I ever wanted was to spend more time with my father. And despite flat out asking him as a child, please, Daddy, spend more time with us. I'm busy, Lisa. You think it's easy earning a living? I go into this quite a bit in my book. But I was that he had a son, my father, which is again revealed. My father was married prior. He had a son who suffered from severe depression, hence the generational depression and anxiety. So my father was very proud of me, the schools that I attended, the friends that I had, the things that I was accomplishing. He shared too much with me. He put me in harm's way several times. He was not around very much. In essence, I only looked at my mother as the bad one because she was the one that was there all the time. But my father was not a fabulous father either. It wasn't until the last year of his life when we spent hours and hours together, said everything that we had to say to one another. I had the courage to ask him questions about his background that I hadn't had prior, because I didn't, not that he wouldn't have told me, I didn't want to know the answers. Like I said to him, my father's legitimate business was, the big soft pretzels on the streets of New York that are sold on the streets of New York and at the sporting venues. That was my father's bakery in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. I said to him, Daddy, you were a poor kid when you started it in the 50s and the early 60s. Where did you get that money from? Now, I would never have had the courage to ask that prior. He he flat out told me that came from Funzi Thierry, who was the boss of the Genovese crime family in the 1970s, who took my Jewish father under his wing, and he was my father's son, Herbert Johnny's son. So that last year, I shared my disappointments with him, that he was not the father that I had hoped, and he shared his disappointments with me. And we said everything that we had to say so that when he did die, he was ready. We were both ready. My mother, on the other hand, she has nothing to do with the book. She will not talk about it. If I bring it up to tell her I'm in People magazine, I'm on TV, I'm this and that, they're bringing in my lunch now. She'll say to me, they're bringing in my lunch now, I can't talk. So there is a closeness to my father that was very, very special.
And when you say people want to know more about his role in the mafia, you said he had a financial role. Was he an accountant?
Which, oddly enough, the money man of the mafia, what does that say to all of you? It says money laundering. I know this sounds bizarre. It wasn't until a few weeks ago that I put together that a money man for the mafia means he laundered money for the mafia. But again, I have different compartments where I wasn't able to open up everything to myself. Even at this age, I'm 62 years old now, and it's just all coming together. My father started, which you'll read about, and some of it is very funny. He was called Pie in the Sky. He would open up 1 million businesses all over. But we never had any, we didn't have that kind of money. So now I realize it was mob money. We opened up a large size designer dress company in the garment center in the 80s, which was comical if you weren't involved in it, which I was. He opened up, there was a bonsai tree company and mattresses from a mental institution in the Philippines. I mean, really funny types of things. Again, if you're not involved in it, it's a riot, but I do see the humor in it, and I did share that in my writing. We lived, by the way, like you see, we didn't live in a big fancy house. I had the best education. I had cars. My father bought me an apartment, but we didn't live glitzy. We weren't, neither parent was interested in that kind of stuff. We had modest living. I wanted for nothing. But that's the way my parents had poor roots, and that's really where they stayed.
So someone's asking about you growing up and your relationships with your schoolmates and friends. Did they come around your home? Did they know, the truth about what your family was about?
Everybody knew we were different. We would go to the local Chinese restaurant, the local deli, whatever. My father, we came to the front of the line. Everything was, a lot of stuff was gratis. We were treated very differently. My father looked different. There was no hiding here. This was not the Larry so-and-so from the next door neighbor. This was Johnny Noble. He was a big hulking guy. There are photos in the book. He talked like this. He wasn't trying to be a gangster, but this is where he came from. He came from a very poor background. We are both Jewish, my mother and my father, but everybody says, "You're kidding, Lisa, you're Jewish? I thought you guys were Italian." So friends would come over. It wasn't spoken. No one said, "Gee, your father looks like he's from the mafia." It was just an unspoken thing in the neighborhood. Now, when I came out with the book and I put it on Facebook, all my classmates who I never spoke to in junior high school and high school, "Oh my God, you were the all-American girl. I can't believe you had this background." People did not know unless they were closer to my father. Sports in my house was it was a business. You didn't sit around with your favorite Gators shirt on a Sunday and eat nachos and stuff like that. There were 3 TVs set up in the den, and sports was a business. If my father did well with the games, as they were called. We had a nice Chinese dinner on Sunday night. Everybody got along or whatever. If he didn't do well and he lost, could be tens of thousands of dollars, the dinner took a slightly different kind of turn. So it was obvious we were not your typical. They used to call me, remember the show, the Munster Show, any of you on the 60s Munster Show with Fred Gwynn? They had a niece who was the beautiful niece. Not that I was beautiful, but she was the one that was odd because they were all monsters. So they said Lisa was Marilyn Munster. They can't quite figure out there, but.
So Jane wants to know, where were you when all of this was taking place? Like when your father would go pick up the money, and would you go with her, or were you privy to any of that?
As a child, I write about that. As a child, like in Brooklyn, before I was 5 years old, he would take me on his stops. He would make stops. I don't know what the stops were about. Maybe it was to pick up money for sports. I know he ran crap games or whatever. But yes, I would go with him. He and my mother fought terribly. So a lot of times my mother would not go to things. I was my father's date. He would take me to bar mitzvahs. He would take me to christenings. He would take me to the weddings like you see on the movie Casino, Martin Scorsese, and the Goodfellas. I was his little buddy. I was the son he never had. He would have liked to have had.
And I guess just to wrap it up, to bring it back to our, Jewish community, was there any, traditions or Judaism in your home? Did you celebrate any of the holidays?
Nothing. I write about my first Seder because here I was 7 years old or 8 years old. I was in this community of the 5 towns of Long Island, and I'd be playing outside, and all of a sudden all the kids would have to go. And I would look at their windows in their houses. They were all lit up with beautiful candles, and you could see that the tables were set with all the china, and relatives were coming, and I desperately wanted that. I did not have Hanukkah. I had a Christmas tree. I had nothing. It wasn't until later that I felt cheated, and I embraced these traditions for myself. And I got to tell you something, my sister-in-law, I see her down on the left there, that she's Jane Blake, and she's married to Alvin Blake, who's my brother-in-law. And when I first moved down here to be with Stan, I was introduced to him in 2011, both she and Alvin said, "We don't know anything about you. We don't know anything about your past." I said, "You'll know about it soon enough." And now it's for everybody, because if I can help one person with mental illness, as I have already, people have come to me, "Gee, Lisa, you're not bizarre. You're not strange. You've suffered this terrible background. If you can come out with certain things, it clears out a lot of pain and enables you to be free and to get on and be capable of what you're truly capable of." And that really is the message. You all have stories. I encourage you to journal for your children, your grandchildren, whoever. Write these down. They're priceless.
Karen.
Yes, thank you.
Well, with that last phrase, I wanted to give her philosophy that she sent me. It's appropriate to read that now. This was what you said your philosophy is. Perhaps the most empowering lesson that you would like to impart to your readers is that most of us have to have the strength, the ability, and the resilience to change the parts of our life that consistently hold us back from reaching our best selves. I always say, says Lisa, our past explains who we are, but our past does not have to define us. That's particularly relevant to my life as well, being a child Holocaust survivor. It does define me, but I also need to move on to the present and enjoy life today. And I did today.
And write, journal, write, because your family deserves to know about your past. And what the good parts, the bad parts, everything. Share it with them. We want to hear.
Absolutely.
Come on, Mike. And say hi. Here's Judge Blake. Huh.
Okay.
Come
Hi,
on,
Judge Blake.
Stan.
Hi, everybody.
Yes, Stuart,
Hey, Stan, how's it
everybody.
going?
There's Jane.
Hi, guys. Oh, what a familiar looking group here. I'm sorry
Hi,
we didn't pay our internet bill. I'm sorry we didn't pay our internet bill.
Yes.
Karen, I think Karen wants to share with you our wonderful
do.
program next week, Wednesday.
do.
And then I'll talk about the week after.
Yes, and well, as a quick segue to what Lisa was just saying about writing, we do have wonderful opportunities at the JCC to get involved in a writing seminar that we offer. And Miriam, and I think you're going to be announcing a wonderful camp that is coming up,
Yes,
which
yes.
there's going to be a writing class there as well. So
we are
encourage
all
you to do that.
going to camp together, a Labor Day weekend. I will be telling you more about that next week. We're all going to a virtual camp. It's even going to be overnight together. Can you imagine that?
So that's great. And next week we are back with Robert Watson. For those of you who were not able to tune in last time, we have expanded our capacity, so no worries there. Robert Watson will be back with us, and he will be speaking on women in politics. It is the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment and women's suffrage, so we are going to be focusing on that, and we're very excited to having him, and our co-sponsor for that program will be NCJW, National Council of Jewish Women, Miami section. So we invite you all back for that next Wednesday at 12:30.
And on the 19th, we have the sponsor of a wonderful program we're going to have. Faye Weiss is sponsoring Reva Ginsburg, who's an expert on the Yiddish culture, the Yiddish language. She is an incredible presenter, and Faye is sponsoring her to do a wonderful piece for us on August 19th on the history of Yiddish language, the culture, and it's specifically being sponsored for 2Gs, the second generation adult children of Holocaust survivors. So then we will end the month with a combination partnership of the Holocaust Institute, my institute, the Miami Beach JCC, and Camp Isabella Friedman from the Berkshires. We're going to have a Labor Day weekend, 2.5 days of getting together for a camp of activities. So we'll be announcing that soon. Thank you, Lisa. You were incredible. Your story's incredible.
Is clapping online? Is this how you do it? Thank you very much. Stay safe and have a wonderful, wonderful summer. Crazy, but wonderful. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Remember, this
Thank
is
you. Thanks for
this is
sticking with
clapping
us.
virtually like this.
What is it like this? Like I'll practice.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.
Bye-bye. Have a wonderful week. See you next Wednesday.